love old time worship and our Bible is King James. We are strengthened in the things, strengthened in the things, strengthened in the things that remain.
Into the Strength of the Things That Remain podcast. We sure are glad that you're tuned this way again this week, and we appreciate each and every one of our viewers and listeners, YouTube. I'm trying to think, all the major podcast platforms. And we need you to share it. You say, well, how can we help the podcast ministry? Well, the best way that you can help it is to share these podcasts with others. If you're getting something out of them, then let somebody else know.
Subscribe on YouTube.
Subscribe on YouTube. Be sure and hit that subscribe button today. We love new subscribers. As a matter of fact, we've got a giveaway. We've already given one of these away. We're going to give another one away. Of course, I'm going to give one to Preacher Keith here. This is a new perk of showing up to do a podcast every time. Amen. These hats, they're made by my son, Strength of the Things That Remain hat. Freedom Forge. You can find him on Facebook, and he can make you custom hats for your church.
We have sponsors now.
That's right.
Yeah, sponsors now.
Custom hats for your church. If you need a custom hat, you reach out to him. Freedom Forge. Preacher Keith, that's your gift for being here. We're glad to have Keith Watkins with us. He is the pastor of the Pleasant Hill Baptist Church out in the Weaverville area. And how long you been out there, preacher?
23 years.
Wow.
23 years.
Yes, sir.
We've got something new we're doing since the last time that you were on the podcast. We've got 7 rapid questions that we ask. This is just off the top of your head. Just give us whatever comes to mind real quick. Number 1, tell us your favorite study Bible. What's your favorite study Bible?
I don't use a study Bible.
Just use plain text, and that is the answer we've gotten from I think about every preacher that we've asked.
When I first got saved, my wife gave me a Schofield study Bible, and it was funny. I would try to read some of the extra stuff in it, new Christian, but it was harder for me to understand than the actual Bible for some reason for me.
Right.
After that, I've never used a study Bible.
Very good. Number 2, your favorite author to read after?
That's a tough one because I try to read a lot.
Right.
I guess probably in the last little bit because of the subject of the author more than the author. But I've been really trying to read a bunch of David Jeremiah books because of the rapture of the church and the second coming and how he deals with that to me in such a simple way.
Yeah,
I've been reading probably every book I could get of him on the second coming and the rapture and things like that.
Right. Digital, do you use a digital study or are you like a book in hand?
Both. I like a book in hand, but I use a program called Sword Searcher, I believe is the name of it. And the reason I enjoy it so much is because I love the Strong's, the easy accessibility to the Strong's in the Old Testament and New Testament. And then I love the 1828 Webster's Dictionary that comes with it.
Right.
So I pull that up, I look at the definitions, and I go on that 1828 dictionary, man, and it just feeds me to do that.
Right. Person other than Christ that has had the most profound impact on your life?
Oh, that's my pastor, Preacher Davis.
Right.
By far.
Yeah. Advice that you would give your younger self if you could go back 20 years and give advice? 30 years.
30 years.
I forget how old you are. 30, maybe 40 years.
40 years.
52 years ago.
50, yeah. I would tell myself, worry less, pray more, and probably secondly would be try not to let people probably tear me down, get me down, situations that was completely out of my control.
Right.
I would say, look, people's going to be people. Let it go. Be who you are, and try not to worry about it and stay on your knees more. Well, I spent a lot of time just worrying and fretting.
Yeah.
over things that I didn't have no control over.
No control.
When you preach, do you use iPad, notebook, loose paper, wide margin Bible?
I use notebooks,
Yeah.
and I just try to stick them back and save them, put them back in a shelf.
And then lastly, other than Christ, your favorite Bible character?
Easily to me, because of every time I read about him, it's like the Lord will show me something I didn't see. I guess it'd be David. I love studying and reading about David.
Right.
But there's another thought that comes to my mind when you say that. I love people in the Bible that was in a bad way.
Yeah.
The maniac in the tombs.
Yeah.
And I know that's different than what you just asked. But
Right.
man, if I read about them and Mary Magdalene and some of those people, I'm just like, whew. But it'd be David.
Yeah.
See, I can get to going on that and say all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But David,
Right.
I love that.
Very good. Very good. So the subject for our podcast today is, keeping it real, having battling imposter syndrome in your life. And the reason that the Lord laid you on my heart, I believe, to do this podcast is because to me, you're always just who you are. You don't care if people agree with what you say or don't agree. I mean, you're not mean
Or
about
what
it.
crowds you're in, who you're
Yeah.
around, just be who you are.
Just
right?
you're just who you are. And so, and I think that's important to discuss. I was thinking about it last night. Over the years, as the Lord has allowed me to preach out more, a lot of times I'll just be honest. I don't care to be, just up front on the podcast. There's times I go into these camp meetings and I feel like, man, I don't belong here. These guys are so much better than me. They're living closer to the Lord than I just know it. I just know I don't belong here. I feel like, and I feel like that it's imposter syndrome. I feel like I don't even belong in this place. These guys are just too good. They're better preachers than I am. I don't know if that affects anybody else. I imagine it does. But if you're not careful, in my opinion, if you're not careful, what you end up doing is you start trying to be those other people.
Right.
Instead of just being yourself because you feel like yourself is not good enough.
A lot of that is just the pride that all of us struggle with.
Yeah.
Because every individual struggles with pride. And if they say they don't, they're lying.
Right.
But everybody does. And I think we want to be accepted. We want people to like us and things and just that spirit of pride and self sometimes gets the best of us.
Right.
And, we want people to really, honestly, we want people to think we're more spiritual than what we are most of the time, just to be honest.
Yeah.
And
Well, tell me, preacher, do you think that's a? I tell you, sometimes I think that maybe it hurts us because our people start looking at us as some sort of superhuman being that never has a problem, never has a failure, never has a fault. And while I think it's good for them to respect the office of pastor, sometimes I think it's good that they see, hey, the pastor, he struggles.
Right.
He understands where I'm coming from. What do you think about those sorts of things?
Well, I can tell you, I think pride, just like what you said, a lot of times pride, but I think also for me, if I'm not careful, it's my insecurities.
yeah,
But to your question, by being around my pastor the way that I was, he was a strong man of God.
yeah,
When I first started going to Georgetown Church, he preached in meetings that I would just dreamed of getting to preach in. He called in men of God that when I would be around them, I would be thinking, man, I am sitting here amongst some giants in the faith. And for some reason, and I couldn't figure it out then, but I believe I know now, there was several of us young preachers, and I'm getting to your question, but he would always put me, in my mind, with the man that I was probably the most intimidated by. He would get us young preachers up and he'd say, all right, now, Brother Keith, I want you to preach with so-and-so. And now, you're not the main speaker. So you get up there and you say what God's laid on your heart, and then you get out of the way and you let him come up. And boy, I'd get up there and I would be a wreck. But he would put me around these men, and then he'd say, now, as soon as service is over, I want you and your wife, we're going to go and take this man out for dinner, and I want you to go with me. So I got to be around those men. And then I got to go with him to meetings. And when he would walk into a building, people would just,
Yeah.
And I would listen to him preach. But then I would ride home with him in the car. And then that's when I would say, it got real.
Right.
Because as a giant of a man as he was, when we would get in the car, and I won't tell all the conversation for the respect of my pastor, but he was preaching one night, and he got on some things. And on our way home, his wife, Miss Vicky, called him. And on the phone, he said, I feel like I really blew it tonight. And when I heard my pastor say that to his wife, I was like, I can't believe my pastor just said that. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he talked to her about it. And I couldn't hear her conversation, but I could hear his side of it. And I thought, my pastor's a real man. I didn't think he was.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't. I didn't think he was a real person. Just thought he was a superhero.
Right.
So that's what really got my mind to thinking, you know what? As much as I look up to this man, he's a real man just like I am.
Yeah.
Right.
And it really began to start a work in my heart. But then he warned me one time, after I'd preached for him several years, he warned me one time. He said, you're going to have to be real careful about something. I said, what? He said, I think sometimes you might be too honest.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, you're going to have to be careful that you're not too honest. And to this day, I still can't figure out what he was trying to tell me, because I don't know how else to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But just to be honest.
Right. Right.
So I could just go on and on and on with this.
You know, and I've heard that too. You know, if you sometimes I guess there's a danger if you're too out there, too vulnerable. That, you know, I guess people you get afraid. Well, I might hurt myself with this person, or I might hurt myself with this group of people. And one of the greatest things that, and I want to walk a fine line here, and I'm going to let Todd speak to it. I want to walk a fine line here. I have respect for my friends. I don't want to disappoint my friends. My friends are my friends. I want them to be happy with the things I do. But ultimately, in the end, the only person that I really should care about pleasing is the Lord.
Yeah.
And as long as He's pleased, I hadn't ought to care. I don't want to sound, gruff. I don't care what the brethren think. I hear people say that, and most of the time they're headed for a mess when they start saying
right.
that.
Really, that's not the right attitude to have. Yeah.
I do care, and I
do too.
want them to be pleased, because, I just think I think that's the right way to be. But ultimately, if it comes down between pleasing men and pleasing the Lord, a man has to please the Lord and do what pleases the Lord in his life. Mm-hmm. Straighten that out. Straighten my mess.
I think you're right there. And Brother Davis was a great mentor to me as well. I never did sit under him as a pastor, but I was in his Bible college, and anyway, and I've heard that from other men. You have to be careful about being too vulnerable, because you don't. If you expose yourself too much, if you let people know all of your failures and all of your faults, and the fear is they can lose confidence in you, because you're supposed to be the standard of spirituality in the church, and so I think that's kind of the mindset that a lot of those men, and I've heard that from other men as well. I do think there's a fine line there.
I do too.
I do think I think you have to be careful. I understand what he was saying. There is a fine line, but we are who we are, and I think, and we're continually growing, every one of us. If you ever get to the place where you're not growing in the grace and knowledge of our Lord Jesus, then something's wrong. It don't matter how old you are, how long you've been in it. But we all have different personalities, and God uses us how we are in light of our personalities. And some people are more comfortable being more honest
Right.
than others. Other people are more guarded. That's just who they are. That's their personality, not only in the pulpit, but just in life in general. That's who they are. And so I think I think, and the Lord understands that. I think the part about being real is that we need to be who we are. We need to accept who we are and who
Yeah.
God made us.
That's right.
And not try to be somebody we're not, and really put on a show. Not like goes back to our pride. We got to guard against that. We don't want to build ourselves up and make people think that we are better than what we are.
So, I mean, it goes back to what we've talked about on this podcast a lot of times, and that's balance.
Yeah.
A balance between those two. Now, I'm going to kick it back over to you, Brother Keith.
All right.
Todd was talking about there about being yourself. And I think we've all done this. We've probably done it ourselves, and we've seen it done. You go to a meeting and you hear a younger preacher preach, and you think, well, I know who he's been listening to because he sounds just like whoever it may be. He uses the same mannerisms, the same catchphrases. Tell me about the process of finding your own voice in the ministry.
Well, that's funny you should ask that, because instantly my mind went to something. I mean, it took me straight to it. By being around some of these men, one of the men that just scared me when I was around him was Sammy Allen. He would come preach every year, Sammy Allen. And Sammy Allen had a unique voice, and he had a unique way that he could preach.
Right.
So he had just come and done a revival. And then after that, we had a youth camp, and I was the youth leader at Georgetown. So I was up preaching at the youth camp, and I didn't even realize I was doing it.
Right.
I was in a big way of preaching, and I started doing my hand. I started doing my hand like Brother Sammy. And while I was preaching, I made eye contact with my pastor, Brother Davis, and he was going just like this.
I can just see him doing that.
And then when I finished, he walked up to me and he goes, "That was some good preaching, Brother Sammy." That's what he said to me. And I thought to myself, you know what? I see how he had influenced me, and how I wanted to have that power of God, and I wanted to have that voice, and I wanted to have that movement. I think it takes someone being real and coming up to you and saying, "Good preaching, Brother Sammy."
Yeah.
For me to go, I'm not Sammy Allen.
Yeah.
I never will be.
Right.
God didn't call me to be him. God called me to be me.
Right.
And I noticed too, a lot of preachers preach alike. Mm-hmm. A lot of preachers that preach for each other preach alike. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Style. Yep.
It's the style of their preaching, it's their delivery, it's the things they say, it's the wording that we use. And sometimes even when I go to a meeting and I hear a lot of preachers preaching alike, now I'm to the mindset of, I'm like, "Lord, please, when it's my time, when it's my turn, when it's my night, Lord, please, just let me be me."
Yeah.
No matter what's going on, no matter how the Spirit's moving, no matter what's happening, please let me be me. Please don't let me get up and try to be something that I'm not.
Right.
Because it's just not being real.
Well, I had a similar experience. Let me tell you, it's a very similar experience. It's so funny that you'd mention that. Years ago, I got on this kick of listening to Joe Arthur on cassette tape. Love to hear Joe. He's still, as far as style goes, he's probably my favorite.
Yeah.
And I'd got to preaching just like him. I mean, even going back and thinking about it now, I was even using that Georgia tone, and I never lived in Georgia in my entire life.
It'll happen.
Well, I was preaching at a camp meeting, and the next day, a preacher that I'll not call his name because he's on the podcast a lot, a good friend of mine, his son was just small at that time. He come running up to me and looked at me and pointed at me and he went, "Joe Arthur." I knew his daddy had said something in the motel room. That's the only reason that boy would have come up and pointed at me and said, his daddy talked about, Bradley's trying to sound just like Joe Arthur. And that, to this day, I'll never forget it.
Yeah,
you talk about smoking my heart. I
know what you're saying.
Oh, wow. That kid's right. I'm just trying to mimic
Yeah.
somebody I love and respect. But
Yes.
I'm just mimicking them. I've got to find my own voice, be my own person.
That's right.
And it's tough at times. You talk about style. One thing that I've tried to do with my people here at the church is teach them to love different styles of preaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like for instance, this coming revival in September, I got revival coming up. I got Brother Don Anderson preaching Sunday morning, Sunday night, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night I got Ricky Gravely, and then Thursday and Friday night I got Brother Eddie Davis. Total opposite ends of spectrum there on style.
Right.
All of them great preachers. They're going to preach a Bible. They're going to feed your soul. But different styles, because I want my people to understand it's the power is not in the hacking.
That's exactly right.
It's not in the style. I was talking to a missionary. We were on a mission trip there, and talking to a missionary out in
Arizona?
No,
Utah.
And he's talking about a young preacher that he'd put in a work out there. And he said he was a hacking North Carolina preacher. And he said I had to tell him, you're gonna have to quit that hacking. Because he said, you won't get nowhere in Utah hacking.
Wow.
He said, won't nobody come back and hear you. If you're hacking and sucking wind preaching, you're going to preach to your wife and that's it.
Wow.
Because these people out here won't listen to you. So, I've tried to impress upon my people, but a lot of people think style equals power.
Yeah.
Right.
If somebody's hacking and sucking wind, they're powerful. If they're not hacking and sucking wind, they ain't got no power to them. But man, we got to get past that.
Yeah.
We gotta get past that.
Yeah.
Well, I remember the first time the Lord taught me that particular lesson. I was at Faith Baptist Camp years ago, and there's a gentleman got up and preached one morning, and mellow tone, did not raise his voice, and I'm thinking, man, when's he gonna preach? Yeah. And he never did raise his voice. He just just basically taught a lesson but when he got done, I was ready to crawl to the altar.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, God just moved in a mighty way, and I discovered then that it's not about style.
Yeah.
The power's in that book.
And I'm not against hacking preaching.
No, I love
like
it. I love it.
I like
But-
it. I say hammer down, son.
Yeah.
Get on
And
with
it's
it.
part of our heritage in these mountains. I remember years ago, Mark Stroud told me, he said, I reckon you boys from North Carolina come out of the womb hacking.
Yeah. I think that if you're around somebody like your pastor, my pastor, you're naturally going to pick up things just by being around them a whole lot. You're going to say things like they say, or maybe even have some mannerisms. You can't help but their influence in your life can't help but affect you in certain
that's
ways.
good, I think. That's a good thing.
That's a good thing. I think the difference is when you are trying, just like my pastor and myself, our styles of preaching are completely different. Now, I may say some things like he says it, or we have some mannerisms, but our styles are completely different. And I think you're talking about finding yourself. I think a lot of that comes from surrounding yourself with people that will be honest with you and that will give you some good constructive criticism. I know a lot of people don't like to hear it. They don't, they think, well, bless God, I'm God's man. And no, it's good to surround yourself with some people that will be honest with you.
Oh, no doubt.
And that will tell you, look, that's, you don't need to be Sammy Allen.
Can I say something on that right there? That to me, it's just kind of the way, not kind of the way, it is the way that I feel like my family is. Like, to me, being real is this. I'm going to sit here with you men, and I'm going to try my best to be just who I am.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nerves, there's this, and there's that, but I was talking to my wife last night. I said, I want you to pray for me. I'm going out here to this podcast. I want you to pray for me that when I get out there, that I'll just be me.
Amen.
I mean, not anything else, just be me. And what I want more than anything, this is what I want more than anything, and I'm going to try to say this and not get tore up. You was talking about at the end of the day not being arrogant, because I don't think being real is being arrogant.
No.
Yeah, I don't think they could see in the same sentence. But you was talking about at the end of the day if the Lord's pleased. But also at the end of the day, this has always been on my mind. I want my family.
Absolutely.
I got 3 kids and a wife. I want my family to say, if they can say this about me, not that Dad was a good preacher, that he was a great pastor, but I want my family to say my daddy was the same daddy at church as he was at home, as he was on vacation.
Amen.
And when I listened to that podcast that he did out there with those men, it was my dad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because to me, what else matters besides that? And like talking about just being honest and being real, you mentioned that. I've always allowed my children and my wife to be real with me. There's been some times to where I just get in a bad way, you know, and get messed up or get my head all jacked up, or I get aggravated. I call it, in my house, we call it getting ill. That's getting flustered or frustrated. And it's nothing, even when my kids were small, it's nothing for one of my children to say, Daddy, why'd you say that to Mama?
Mm.
And I would say, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And they'd say, well, why did you get mad at Mom when you said that? And I'm like, I wasn't mad when I said it. And my family has always said, everyone else in the car knows you are but you.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And that's the way my family's always been. We've always been able just to be honest with each other.
And you've had apparently to encourage that.
I have.
You know, because, you know, most people would just, you know, keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
You know.
And we have just, even as a family,
Yeah.
kids, we just tried to be just real. Honest. Just be who you are and be honest about life, family, church. I tell the church all the time, I'm like, look, I get up here and I tell you guys a lot, and I'm not going to tell you everything. But I tell Pleasant Hill, you will never read nothing in the newspaper about your pastor that I didn't already tell you on Sunday.
Yeah.
I got nothing to hide.
Right.
Nothing to hide.
Right.
And I feel like over the 23 years I've pastored there, I felt like from that coming from the pulpit and around my family, that now I don't have a perfect church. We none do, but I feel like people in our church are just honest.
Yeah.
You know,
But anyway, I might have got off a little too far on something there. But
I feel that 100%. We was out west there a few weeks ago. I'd got up on one of those, I don't know, it was Monday morning because we went to church that night. I got up on that Monday morning. You know, I preach a lot on the mind.
yeah,
I've been preaching lately a lot on anger and fear. And we was looking for a place. I was hangry. Looking for a place to eat breakfast. And Gabe had said, well, here's the place. We went to it, and they had a big gay flag out in the front. I said, I ain't eating there. And he said, well, here's another place. Went over there, big transgender flag out in the front. This is in Salt Lake City. I said, I ain't eating there. I said, let's just go to McDonald's. So he navigated us to McDonald's. So we pulled up, and the drive-through guy barely spoke English. Very red, I mean, just barely. And of course, out there, they think I don't speak English.
right, yeah.
Because we're trying to communicate, and it goes downhill. He can't understand me. I can't understand him. I get ill with him. He finally gets my order right, and then I'm like, Gabe, what do you want? And he said, well, I don't want nothing now. They're going to spit in your food. He said, I don't want nothing. Well, that flew all over me. So I throwed that thing up and drive. Squalled the tires coming out of there, you know. Everybody just gets stone quiet in my vehicle. We're driving out through there. I'm so mad. And I said, you know, anybody's going to work taking the order ought to be able to speak English. I said, that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Nobody said a word. We just kept riding. Reagan, she's my conscience.
Yeah.
She said, Daddy, she said, next time that you're preaching on anger, She said, I want you to think about this what just happened there at McDonald's.
Wow. That's keeping it real.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, and I mean, what could I say? I said, you're right, sweetheart.
We was in Pigeon Forge one time, and I don't know why I did it. To this day, I don't know why I did it. Was riding down the road, had a car full of kids, got up here at this red light, and I looked over, and there was a group of girls walking down the sidewalk, and they might as well not had no clothes on. So I rolled the window down, just didn't even think. I rolled the window down, I hollered, get some clothes on! I just said it, as loud as I could scream it. I don't even know why I did it. Rolled the window up, and one of my kids said, that'll win them to Jesus. And I thought, what an idiot.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
But you know, sometimes, though, we will let our family away with that. But somebody else
Call us out.
and we won't be so easy going about it.
You're right.
And I think having people apart from your family that will do that is important.
You know,
And I think it's important to surround ourselves
interesting.
with people like that.
You bring up an interesting point right there. So, for instance, I have heard younger preachers preach, and they'll have a byword. You know, they'll say "Amen" 75 times, or "today," or "friend." That was mine when I was first started. I said "friend" too much.
Right.
Finally, Rachel just told me, "You're saying friend too much." So I hardly ever say it now. But how do you go about talking to a young man about issues like that you see in their preaching?
I don't know. I mean, I know my pastor. He would just be honest with me, and I think, and him and I have talked about it, and I've told him, you know, man, you tough on me, and but he knows I can. He knows I will take it, and I won't get mad and go down the road to another church, and so he can be honest with me,
Yeah.
and vice versa. He will call me and ask me things, and I'll be honest with him. And we have that type of relationship. I know a lot of men, they're afraid to be honest with maybe some young preacher in their church, or some young preacher they're trying to influence, because they know they're not going to accept it. They're going to get angry. And if they have that type of attitude, I don't know how you can help them.
Right.
If they're not willing to receive and be teachable. Nobody likes to be criticized.
No.
Nobody does. And nobody likes to, for somebody to tell them they need to improve on this area or whatever. Nobody enjoys that. But it's good for every single one of us.
It is.
It's good for every single one of us. But I think that's we need to learn to have enough humility to be able to accept that, and I think that we need to let people know that we will accept that.
Right.
And if we've got that, if a young man has that type of spirit about him, then you can go with him and be honest, and he'll work on it. But if they don't, they've got bigger problems than just whatever issue it is.
Right. You know, you was talking about surrounding yourself with people. I remember when I first got hired at the sheriff's office, Gary Banks, he was the sheriff at that time, he sat me down. He said, "You know why I hired you?" I said, "No." He said, "Well," he said, "you're opinionated." And he said, but I respect your opinion. But he said, I need somebody that's going to tell me if I'm about to do something stupid, that they think it's stupid.
Right.
And he said, most people won't do that because I'm the sheriff. And he said, but I expect you to come in here and say, hey, I think what we're doing right here is stupid. Because he said, I need somebody. He said, I don't want a yes man.
Right.
I want somebody that's going to tell me the truth.
Yeah.
Everybody needs that in their life.
And not everybody's right. Not everybody's, and what I mean by that, sometimes people can come to you and they may say something, and what they're saying may not even be right.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
but what it does, it causes you to pull back, and they should cause you to pull back and think about it a little bit.
Don't you think there's some truth in all criticism, though? All criticism has some truth.
Yeah.
I think so, but I also feel this. I think the respect from the person that is telling you that, to me, has a whole lot to do with it also. Like, there's a man who, to me, he's like a dad to me. And he was a chairman of deacons at the church for years. He's not any longer, but I went into a deacons meeting one night, and I was about, I know I used some crazy terminology, but I was about half cocked before I went in. I had some things on my mind that I was really aggravated about. And I remember he was a chairman, and me and him would always talk. We would always be on the same page, so that if anything come up, me and him already knew about it. Now, the rest of there's probably some of them going to hear this, and it's okay. But we wanted to make sure if everything went crazy, at least me and him was connected. We hadn't talked. I went into this meeting, and boy, I was fit to be tied. There was some things that just really had got me sideways. So, of course, they said, "What you got on your heart, Pastor?" So, boy, here I go. And I went. And when I started, partly of it was good, part of it was just mad talk. And when I got finished saying everything, every man sit there and they listened to me as their pastor. They respected everything that I said. But I never will forget it to this day. My close friend looked at me across that table and he said, "Something's wrong." I said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "Something's wrong." He said, "This is not the spirit you're usually in."
Mm.
And he said, "I don't know what it is, Pastor," but he said, "Something's wrong." And that was all he said to me. And I sit there and I thought, there is something wrong. It's my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of what I said. There's not really anything wrong with what I said.
That's how you said it.
Because it was the truth. But my heart and my spirit and my attitude, and boy, when I come in there, I wasn't coming in there to reconcile. I wasn't coming in there to fix. I wasn't coming in there to discuss. I was coming in there to drop the hammer, bust heads, and let them men know that I was their pastor, bless God, and this was not right. And there's times for that.
Right.
But boy, my spirit, and he checked me on that. And I'd be willing to say, if they might have been some other men in that room that would have said that, it might have made me say, "Yeah, I'm going to tell you what's wrong is you.
Yeah.
Right.
You're the problem."
Yeah.
But by my respect for
Right.
this man who had loved me, prayed with me, cried with me, laughed with me, sit in his house till 1 o'clock in the morning, spent time together, just me sharing my heart and him helping me, by him saying what he said to me, being honest, being real, "Son," I don't think I said another word the rest of the meeting.
Yeah.
I just sit there and I do remember this. It was either that meeting or the next. I come back in, I was like, "Oh, every man in this room an apology." Because the Holy Spirit used him.
Yeah.
Amen.
But I think a lot of that comes with the respect of the person that is telling you
Sure.
honest from their heart.
Right. And
Yeah.
I think I've heard somebody say that you shouldn't take criticism from people that you wouldn't take advice from.
That's good.
You know, and but as I've said, even your enemies, the criticism your enemies level against you, there'll be an element of truth
Yeah, they will be.
in that. But you know, let's sum it up this way, preacher. So there's a young preacher watching the podcast, and there's a lot of them that do, and they're trying to figure out who they are, what their style is, what their real voice is. A lot of times when they walk in the pulpit, if they were going to be honest, they feel like they put on a preacher persona that they feel like's really not them. How can they start on the journey toward figuring out who they really are? You know, and I've heard other people say that. They say, "Well, you know, I talked to this fellow out here and he talks like us." He gets in the pulpit and suddenly You know, he has the radio voice or whatever. How does a person find their voice? What was the first step? Step one for these guys that are watching to find out who they really are.
Wow.
Well, I want to say something.
Wow.
It's been said that there's preachers that go up to the pulpit, and then there's preachers that go into the pulpit, and there's preachers that come down into the pulpit. And what that means is they go up into it because their life has not been a life that maybe God's man. You know, it's not a life of character, and so when they get in the pulpit, they have to pretend that they are something they're not. Mm-hmm. And there's men that they're just the same all the time, and they just go into the pulpit, and they don't have to change who they are. They don't have to pretend they're something they're not. They just go in. There's men that come down into the pulpit. They've been with God, and they come down. I think there's a lot of truth to that. You know, just learning that. And I've said this before about different men. I think to a lot of people, preaching is something that they do instead of it being who they are.
That's good.
Preaching is not something that we just do on the side. That's who I am.
Yeah.
That's my life. It's every. I mean, does that make sense? You know, in every decision, in every, you know, we have to realize we're God's men, and that's who we are.
Right.
And we're to embody that. I think, you know, through the power of the Spirit of God, of course.
You know, I work a secular job, and just about everybody I work with calls me preacher. Mm-hmm. You know, I call my immediate supervisor to ask him for a day off. He'll say, when he answers, he always says, "Preacher man, what you doing?" You know, and I'm not saying that I'm anything, but
that's who you are.
It's who I am. To them, to the people I work with, that's who I am. Man, that's good. I never had thought about it just exactly that way. You know, if I had to give some advice about finding your own voice and being yourself, there's a couple things that I would say. I was just thinking about it after I asked the question.
Yeah, that question's that's good.
One is, I think you got to realize a need for it. You know, the first thing is you got to want to find your own voice and be yourself. Secondly, I think it's prayer. Lord, help me to be real.
Yeah.
Help me to just be me. You got to put aside some of this competition stuff that's easy to get into in the ministry.
Yeah.
You know, I want people to move when I preach, or I want to, you know, do good for the sake of me doing good rather than do good for the sake of the Lord. You got to put aside some of that. And then one thing that I would suggest to every preacher do, I don't care how long you've been preaching, is you got to listen to yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's awkward.
Yeah.
To go back and listen to yourself preach.
Yeah.
But I have heard me doing things that nobody had the guts to tell me I was doing.
Yeah, sure.
Because I went back and listened to myself or watched myself, and I saw myself doing things that nobody had the guts to tell me I was doing.
That's good.
So
yeah.
that's what I think. That's what I think.
That's good.
Well, It's been a great conversation, man. And I appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you.
I tell you, you've become a great friend of mine and
I feel the same.
a confidant. And I tell you, I just love some of these friends that the Lord's allowed me to make in the ministry across the spectrum. And I just love God's men. And so we hope it's been a blessing to you. If it has, be sure and share the podcast. And tune in again next time. Until then, don't forget to strengthen the things that remain. We'll see you then.